What's going on, everybody? Troy Rawlings here. Welcome to another exciting episode of Meet Them. And today I have the honor and privilege to interview one of my dear friends, Troy. Without her, I probably wouldn't have honed this whole TV image thing. And I'm still working on it, and she's teaching me when I can when I can capture her and she's not on like a board meeting around the world or travel. Well, in this dispensation of time, 2020, I don't like to date these, but this is an historic moment in time. So June 2020, and for those that were a part of it, those that look back in history, you'll realize for coronavirus to the uprising, everything that's going on. We kind of need her back on the air. Without further ado, Wanda Draper. I had to say Wanda Q Draper. I did not know your middle name was Queen, which is so fit.
Queen is my maiden name.
Oh, Queen is your maiden name?
Yes.
I love it. I love it. So how are you?
Excellent. Absolutely excellent. Despite all that's going on, we're still standing.
Yes, yes. And we're gonna do a little this is just some fluff stuff for you guys that really want to get to the meat. We're gonna get to the meat. But I remember when everything started hitting and you and your husband had came here to go somewhere on travel, on vacation, this, that, another. And I'm like, oh man, it's crazy. I'm like, oh, Wanda! Because y'all went on an extended cruise.
Yes, we did. We cruised from LA to the South Pacific. Oh, and so we were gone for a month. And as it turned out, we got back into LA on March 1. And we were the last cruise ship that docked in LA without being sent back out to sea and to quarantine. And we hung out in LA that day. We went to Venice Beach. We just hung out, and then we got a flight home. And we were grateful because we got our vacation in. We got to go and enjoy it. And it was amazing. It was an amazing trip. And so we were glad to get home and very grateful. Very grateful.
I'm getting all my tour information from you, so that's a whole nother conversation on what places to go, because I know you've been doing this for a while. I want to jump back. I'm gonna be all over the place, so I'm gonna try to do my best. You got to train me in journalism to be a bit better. About 16 years ago, I happened to be helping with some promotion at the Lyric Opera House for Chinese Fantabulous, those Chinese spectaculars you see. Get a chance to go. It's amazing when they're on tour again. And I'm there and I see you. I think you were with your husband, you and your husband. And I see you and I was like, I had seen you over the years. And but I hadn't seen you in a long time. So I walk up to, and she looks exactly the same. You know, parents and adults stop aging and we age as kids. So she looked exactly the same. So I walk up and I'm like, hey, Miss Wanda, you probably don't remember me. She was like, the face looks familiar. And I said, Troy Rawlings. I used to live across the street from you coming up. And do you remember what you said after that?
No, what did I say?
She was like, oh my God, you are a terror. And I was like, oh.
I still remember you going into my bathroom, getting my nail polish, and writing on my bathroom walls with nail polish. So when I say terror, I meant that.
Now to be in my own defense, me and her son were like best friends. We were best friends. And when we came over, we just, all right, what to do? And Miss Wanda was the work. She was We had no reference point for that. And I'm just where I start giving roses, because I like to give roses to my people that I appreciate while they're here. Because with everything that's going on, we don't know. You were the only person that on earth that I knew. She knew Oprah and she knew Hulk Hogan. She had a picture with Hulk Hogan, and you're a kid. You was like, Oprah we see on TV in Baltimore. It was like, but she had a picture with Hulk Hogan, and she was like, how did your mom? She and Hulk Hogan wasn't, Wanda had some height on her, so Hulk Hogan didn't look that much bigger. She was like, look, she's amazing, but she was. I don't know the whole story behind it, but she was just a businesswoman, working class. I didn't fully know what she did until I was looking at pictures and piece by piece. And as I got older, I started putting together that she was in media. She was doing news. She was doing different things. But I talk about that till now, and I tell people that she called me a terror. She's like, terror. She was like, oh, you look like you've grown into a nice young man.
But a lovable terror. But a lovable terror. Like even when you walked across the back of my living room sofa, lovable.
I still have a mark on me from the time we were in her backyard, and we were building. I don't know what was going on with campus. We had an amazing area, but there was bamboo growing in the backyard. So we were trying to build a hut with bamboo. I still have a stab mark from trying to yank bamboo out, and it stabbed me in the leg, and I shot across the street. But amazing times.
I still remember when you and your little friends, I decided to cook all of my week's groceries because we had a big cookout. I fed all of the guys. I thought I was done. And I said, well, I'm going to cook all this chicken and fish. I'm going to cook everything. So when I come home during the week, all I have to do is warm it up. So I cooked it all and put it in this beautiful pan and covered it so it would cool so I could bring it in the house. When I came back to get it, you guys had eaten it all.
It seemed like she was doing a cookout. it seemed like it was. We didn't know what meal. This was the late 70s, early 80s. We didn't know what a
no
meal.
boundaries.
Meal plan. We didn't know what a meal plan was. But when we reconnected that day, we talked, and she instantly started supporting what I'm doing. She didn't know that I had went full-fledged into the entertainment industry and trying to figure out what my calling was, and she knew I was doing comedy. She came out to my comedy shows. I remember when you said, I love what you're doing. Let me help you get on TV. I want to put your stuff on TV. And I was like, you can't put my comedy show on TV. And she was like, I was like, what do you need? What do you need? And she was like, give me a half an hour show like Ellen. And I said, I'll give you a half an hour show that I would do. And you literally took me through the process. And it was stuff that started before then, and we would meet and she would talk to me. But when I moved here to California, you literally took me through the process. And I hired a crew. I got the production funds. I got everything together. And I did a TV pilot just by what she was telling me to do. And it when I say it flowed smoothly, it was amazing. Once I got with the right executive producer and stuff like that. And she gave me, I had all these words from doing the Taboo show. I was like, what in this list can I say? She was like, none of it. I was like, oh, okay. But it was amazing. And she said, you know what? We'll air it. And when I tell you she aired my TV pilot after Hardball with Chris Matthews, after a Ravens game, on Christmas morning, people were calling me, letting me know exactly when they aired. One time I was in town, and I don't think I told you this. I was in town at my brother's house. My aunt and uncle were there. Ravens game just went off. I'm talking about all this stuff. I knew it was supposed to come on sometime, and it came on after Ravens game. Amazing. So I just want to say thank you for continuously inspiring me and giving me a voice in media and all the great things that are to come. And I thought you were just doing it because she loved this kid from Baltimore. Come to find out, this is just what she do. So I ain't special.
No, that's not true. Very special.
So that's all right. That's enough of my memory lane. When did you realize? Are you originally from Baltimore?
I am. I am a native Baltimorean, not a Baltimorean, a native Baltimorean.
Yeah, Baltimorean. I don't know what the Baltimorean thing. They people don't know. So where did you go? Where your grade school? Where did you go to grade school, high school? Where did you go coming up?
So I went to Robert W. Coleman Elementary School, and then I went to Calverton, what we call then junior high school, which they call middle school now.
Right, right.
And then I went to Forest Park High School. When I
Forest
went,
Park.
when I went to Forest Park High School, one of the things I decided I wanted to do was work on the school newspaper because I like to read and I like to write. And I took my very first journalism class, and I walked in the classroom, and on the first day of class, the teacher said, "Welcome to the Fourth Estate." I'm like, no, I signed up for the journalism class. And so I had to look up what the Fourth Estate was because I had never heard it referred to as the Fourth Estate. So I looked it up and found out that the Fourth Estate was journalism. And I really, really loved that class. I mean, I was all in because I had a chance to write. And not only did I have a chance to write, I had an audience. I had people reading my byline and reading my stories. And so at that point, I decided I wanted to be a journalist. So you have to understand that this was in the late 60s, and this little black girl from Baltimore decided she wanted to be a journalist. And so anyway, I became the associate editor of the high school paper, and then subsequently, I became the first African American editor of the paper. I was the second woman and the first African American. And so I decided that we needed to compete. So I started entering our newspaper and our articles in national high school newspaper competitions. And we started winning. We won the National Newspaper Society Award. We won the Columbia School of Journalism Award. We went to New York, to Columbia to pick up our award. My mom still has it. And then my senior year, I won the National Scroll for the Promise of Greatness in Journalism. And so that was in Austin, Texas, but it was the day I graduated from high school. But they mailed me my scroll, which my mom still has to this day. But I decided that I was going to college and I was going to major in journalism. And my parents were aghast because there were very few black journalists. There were definitely very few women journalists. There was nobody in our neighborhood, community, family, anywhere that had done this.
I was about to say who would. Right. I was trying to think of any black journalists that might have been around in that time.
So I had no mentor. I had nobody I was looking up to. This was like my vision, and this was what I wanted to do. And so my father said to me, I am not wasting my money. I will pay for you to go to school, but you're going to have to minor in something where you're going to get a job. Because his idea was that I was going to end up on a park bench freelance writing.
In New York somewhere.
Which was to be expected at that time. He would have understood it if I wanted to be a teacher, a nurse, a lawyer, but not a journalist. I mean, nobody had that vision. And so when I went to the University of Maryland, College Park, the advisor looked at me and said, you know, what makes you think you can be a journalist? And I looked at him and said, because I like to write and I'm good at it. And in my senior year, I got hired by the Baltimore News American, which was a Hearst newspaper at the time. And there were towns were two newspaper towns. So we had the Baltimore Sun and the Baltimore News American. So I got hired by them because they had something called Young World. And it was a magazine about what young people were doing. And it ran in the Sunday paper every Sunday. And you got to write your story and your picture and your byline. And so they asked me to write this one story, and I did, and they liked it. And then they hired me, but they didn't tell me they were hiring me. And so I wrote the story and I got a check. I'm like, yes, this is for me. And so then I went to work there after I graduated high school, my first summer between high school and college. And I worked there every summer between high school and college. And it was funny because I was there, I was sitting there, I had my own desk, I had my own typewriter, we didn't have computers, and I was just writing my stories and I was having a grand old time. And somebody came up and they said, we're going out for drinks, you want to go? And I'm like, no, I can't go. And they were like, how old are you? I'm like, I'm 15. They're like, oh, no. And so they ran down to human resources and they had to call my parents and they had to go to the state office building and get a work permit because I wasn't even old enough to work in the state of Maryland.
And they were cutting checks like.
So I got a work permit and I worked there every summer.
Wow. So go full circle. What did you end up minoring?
So I minored in linguistics. I minored in speech communications and linguistics because I told my father I was going to be a linguist, and he believed that because he kept paying tuition so I could go to school.
Are you sure you're going to be this linguist, right? He's like, yeah, I got you. So you go and you get your you got your first degrees in journalism. What's your master's?
Right. And so the interesting part about it was I graduated in 1973. And so I was there during the riots, when they had the Kent State. I was on campus then, and I looked around and I said, you know what? There are 35,000 people here, and I don't care what they do or what they protest. I am graduating May 1973. And so I did. I didn't care what went on around me. I just kept going to class. I was graduating. My father gave me 4 years. He was not paying for more than 4 years. I had to do it. So also the year I graduated, Time Magazine did a cover story, and it said that 1 out of every 10 journalism students would get a job in the field, and the rest would not. And so I was a little discouraged by that, but I looked around my class and said, it
must be me.
No, there's gonna be 9 other people that don't get a job. I'm gonna get a job. And so the December before I graduated, I got a job. I got hired by the Baltimore Sun in December of 1972 to start in May of 1973. And so Most kids were going on trips, they were hanging out, they were doing all sorts of things, they were backpacking abroad. I graduated on Saturday, May 19th. I went to church on Sunday, and on Monday, I went to work. I did nothing in between. I went straight to work. That was how bad I wanted to be there. Only to arrive and find out that I was the only Black woman in the newsroom.
So let's speak on that before we. I don't want to skip anything. I got you. It's I won't say it's hard to get you because you're very accommodating with your time, but I got you. So so 1973, pre-74. How long did you work at the Sun?
I was there for 10 years.
So from 1973 to 1983, you're at the Baltimore Sun. How long did it take before you weren't the only Black woman in the newsroom?
It took until Gwen Ifill showed up.
Gwen Ifill?
It took until Gwen Ifill showed up. That's how Gwen Ifill and I became friends. It was just the two of us.
So,
she came from Boston, so it must have taken about 4 years.
4 years?
Yes. And it was interesting because on the Morning Sun, Gene Sadler showed up. So there was one person. There were none on the Sunday Sun. And one day I was sitting next to one of my colleagues, and we had been there about the same time. We both had degrees, and he was talking about how much union dues was. And
Mm.
so, because then they used to walk around and deliver your paycheck to your desk. He was talking about union dues. And so I said to him, why are you paying more union dues than I am? And that's when I discovered that he was being paid more than I was.
And what was his
so
position?
he was a reporter, just like I was.
Right.
So at the time, women reporters were making about 49 cents to every dollar of a male reporter. So I just walked into the managing editor's office and told them I thought there had been a mistake. They could not have meant to pay me less. And my next paycheck was corrected. So I was the first woman to make equal salary to male reporters. And then
and that was, and what year was that?
So that was 1973.
Oh yeah, as soon as you found out, you was like, wait, we ain't going any further than that. So
I had to have a conversation with them about we needed women's bathrooms because there weren't women's bathrooms because they didn't have women in the building. You know, there was a few bathrooms for the secretaries, but other than that, men had a bathroom on every floor. There was not a bathroom on the floor of the newsroom. It was not a lady.
So this is something key. In 1973, 74, was Baltimore City still like 50% African? Was it like, how many African Americans lived in Baltimore City or the Common at that point in time?
Baltimore at the time was still like 48%.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was no representation in newspaper media, which was the main source of media outside of people that could actually afford. By the 70s, right. I know at least one black and white TV, So, but in something that came out every day, like every day, the news was the Sun twice a day.
5 times a day. 5 times. The newspaper came out 5 times a day. There were 5 editions every day.
I didn't know that. So as time went on, they broke down to 3 and then 2 papers a day.
Right.
5 papers a day. So the first edition would come out what, 6 in the morning, 4 in the morning?
There would be the Morning Sun, and then there'd be a later edition, and then there'd be the first edition of the Evening Sun, the second edition of the Evening Sun, and then it was called the Evening Sun Final, which came out after 6 o'clock.
Y'all getting jewels. I didn't know this. And the Baltimore Sun end up becoming one of the major papers in the country.
During that time, the Baltimore Sun was one of the top 10 papers in the country.
Yeah.
And it was owned by a local family.
So you're at the Sun, and you're there until 1984. So by 84, was Oprah even on the air at 84? Was that 82, 84? When did she come on the air in Baltimore? Because I don't remember any black women.
Oprah came on the air because in 84, I went to WJZ-TV.
Right.
And Oprah came to WJZ-TV. And we had a mutual friend from Tennessee. That was actually how we met. So my friend from Tennessee said, look, my girl's coming to your town. She doesn't know anybody. She's never been there before, but she got this job. And so I was wondering if you could show her around. So I was living in Columbia, and so she didn't have a place to stay. So she stayed with us for about 3 weeks. And then she decided she liked Columbia, so she moved to Columbia. And she lived in Columbia also. But the Baltimore population was growing, more black people, but our representation was still equally as minimal. They kind of hire one of us at a time.
Some people looking at 2020 like.
And then we went through this period where they hired a couple of us. There were like 5 of us, and Time magazine nationally hired 10 African American journalists. and we were celebrating. We formed the National Association of Black Journalists, and
Mm.
you know, we were hooking up with people all over the country and talking about what was going on, and we were having an annual convention, and then all of a sudden we went out of
Y'all are
style.
wondering if y'all are wondering what I'm writing. Some of this stuff I don't know. I'm Larry King 101. So I'm like like that's why I love doing what I do. So National Association of Black Journalists, you start that. Is that still in existence? That's still in existence now.
Yes, it is. And we started in Baltimore. We started before the National Association. We started the association, the Baltimore Association of Black Media Workers, ABMW. And so other cities saw what we were doing. Dwayne Wickham started it, and so we decided, that's when we decided we'd have a national association, and all of us would be called the local branch of the National Association of Black Journalists.
Love it. I love it. So 84, yeah, WJZ. How long did you stay at WJZ?
I stayed at WJZ a year. I got appointed by the governor to a position, and so I left TV to go be director of public affairs for the governor, and specifically for health and human resources.
And so that was Schaefer?
So no,
Schaefer,
that was
Schaefer
Harry
was
Hughes.
that was who?
Harry Hughes was governor.
Okay.
And so Harry Hughes called me and said, I'd like you to do this. And I was like, I don't do politics. And he said, I've been told that I need somebody that understands radio, television, and newspapers, and that's you. I need you to come talk to me. So I went to talk to him. I figured no other governor is going to appoint me to anything else. I need to go check this out. And I liked the job. It was very interesting. But what was more interesting was I would go to places in the state that I'd never been. Like I'd never been to Charles County. You know,
Right.
I'd never been. We don't go to Western Maryland. We don't go to Southern Maryland.
Don't go to Southern Maryland, right?
And when I get there, people would say, "Here comes the state," you know, because, and I'm like, I'm not the state. I'm Wanda.
Right.
But because of the level of authority, it's like, here comes the state. And the other thing I did was, at the time, all organizations that the state gave $100,000 or more a year to, I had to sit on their board.
Mm.
And so I went to this one organization meeting, and it looked really good on paper. When I got there, they were doing nothing. I mean, nothing. And so they barely acknowledged me. So I'm okay with that. So when I got back, I wrote a report to the governor of all the board meetings that I'd been to. And I said, this is what's going on here. And I said, here, nothing's going on. And so what I suspected would happen was that he'd dispense some people and they'd fix it. That's not what happened. What happened was he cut their funding. And the funding had been obtained by a powerful senator. And so he was very upset. He's very upset. And so, but he didn't tell me. And so I called him up and I said, so, and he said, well, you know, you waltzed in there looking like Cinderella and then you cut our funds. I said, no, I came in like a professional. I listened, I observed, I asked you for information. And as a result of that, I made a deduction and I shared that with the governor. The governor cut your funds because you weren't doing anything. And so then I kind of got a little bit of a reputation of being the B word, you know, because, you know, but the fact of the matter is $150,000 was going to an organization in the heart of the city that needed it more than anything else, and they weren't getting it. They weren't getting anything. They weren't getting anything.
Sounds kind of. Now I'm going to fast forward here. is it amazing to you that 40, close to 40 years later, you're seeing situations where communities and projects and things aren't getting funding, and funding is going places where it's not being properly used, and that we're not even talking about, well, actually, you were right in the midst of public service, so we are talking about public service. What do you feel about that?
It is still amazing, and it is still disgusting. I remember seeing the inequities in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s. I remember just looking at the state budget when University of Maryland wanted to build a fine arts center and Morgan wanted to build a fine arts center. And Morgan got a $10 million fine arts center, and University of Maryland got a $200,000 fine arts center. I just remember just
$200,000?
200 million.
Million.
Yes. And
what year was that?
So that was 90s, probably.
Oof.
But I mean, you just continue to see the inequities. I mean, the whole issue now with HBCUs in Maryland is how much money goes to the majority institutions and how much goes to the HBCUs. It is incredulous, and it continues to be that way. And I mean, you look at the stimulus funds now. How many Black businesses do you know got any stimulus money? But when I look around Baltimore, Ruth Chris Steakhouse, all of these national chains, they got money. Major institutions, I know of an institution that got $100 million in the stimulus money. $100 million in stimulus money. And some of these small business, if they had gotten $100,000 to pay their employees and keep going, they could stay afloat. But now when you walk around our community, those businesses are going to be gone. They will never be able to come back. So this is going to be a major change for us. And not only are the businesses gone, but so many of us have lost our jobs. Like, I mean, the Baltimore Orioles, how much money can they have? And yet
they got stimulus.
They chose not to pay. They didn't get stimulus, but they chose not to pay their employees. And now those jobs are gone because they're not going to be fans in the stands. So all of those people will not be coming back. Mm. And they haven't gotten a penny from a multi-billion-dollar operation. So a lot hasn't changed. The knee on the neck hasn't changed, but the knee on us economically has not changed either.
So now I'm going to rewind a bit. I thought that was pertinent, but I want to rewind a bit. So you're working with the governor's office. You're seeing these things. You're getting a taste of, and you didn't want to touch politics, but you got a taste of exactly how it worked and how this money and stuff goes around. Was that the point where you decided that no matter what you did, you were going to get involved with some type of philanthropy, or was that, when did that occur that you said, you know what, in the midst of me doing this, I have to stay grounded and give back?
That happened at the very beginning of my career, because two things happened. One, I saw that what we did not get covered in the daily paper. And so I decided that was my job. I was going to get us covered in the daily newspaper. And one of my stories is I knew Dr. Levi Watkins, who invented the defibrillator implant. And so I wanted to do a story on him. But I heard at the Sun that basically people of color could never appear on the front page of the paper unless it was a crime. And so I decided.
Heard that? And was that a whisper or in a meeting? Okay, guys, I'm just letting y'all know.
Oh, it was like they always do it. It was a whisper.
Mm.
And so I decided that Levi Watkins had done something that was world renowned, life-changing, life-saving, and he deserved to be on the front page of the Baltimore Sun. So, first of all, Hopkins didn't want me to interview him. I had to sneak around to interview him, and then they tried to throw me out. But I got the interview because he insisted. And so then I knew that if they saw his picture, they wouldn't put it on the front page. But they didn't know who he was. So instead of submitting the photographs with my story, I submitted the story. They were like, Wanda, this is great. Front page, put it on the front page. But I held on to the pictures. And so it was linotype then. It was before computerization. And so it was being done by hand. So I had the picture. So all of a sudden there was this frantic call. We don't have the picture of the doctor in the story on A1. And when I gave it to him, it was too late. So he had to be on the front page. And so, that was the kind of thing that I had to do. I had to win the war, not the battle. Mm. And so I would pick and choose my wars, and I'd play to win. It did give me the opportunity to do stories and have readers learn about African Americans in this community that were doing great things. And I was always immensely proud of that I had that opportunity to do that, to say I'm doing this story. And I have one particular incident where all of the editors were white. And so I was working on a story, and there was a whole newsroom. It was like 55 reporters on staff at the time. And so a brawl breaks out in South Baltimore among poor white people, like hillbilly poor white people,
like Pigtown.
And so they look around the room and they decide they're gonna send me.
Oh, what?
And so
was this in Pigtown or something? Where was it?
Yes. And so I went up to him and said, "Excuse me. Somewhere did somebody tell you that black people and poor white people are the same? Because if they did, they were wrong. We're not, and I'm not going." I said, 5 minutes ago, you had an A1 story. You looked around the room and you did not send me. I'm not going. And I didn't go.
Now, because we don't get a chance to hear the one thing I love about me getting a chance to sit down with you and interview you, I knew you had history because at one point in time, and it's always stuck in my head, you were one of the only people, like I said, as a kid, you see, I don't know anybody that has a picture with Hulk Hogan. Why does your mother have, I remember asking, why is your mother with Hulk Hogan? He was like, oh, it's part of it. And then I think I would see you, I think if it was a sporting event or something, sometimes you see you with like a badge on and stuff. I was like, why is Miss Wanda at the wrestling thing? Why is she at the hockey game? What's she doing at the Civic Center? What does she do? And so this for me is and I hope for the people it's encouraging, because we're not talking about a time where you can turn on this phone and you can upload it and thousands of people are seeing it. We're talking about a time where if you don't put your fingerprints on the paper as it's going out, it's not done.
Exactly.
It's some people that still don't know who Dr. Levi Watkins is. Right. My mother she was a nurse. She did private duty nursing for Dr. Charles Drew's wife, who lived in Maryland. I didn't know it until, she was dealing with this lady and she bought this thing on Dr. Charles Drew. I was like, oh, where'd you get this? It was like, I'm caring for his wife. I was like, what? So there's so much history, and it's funny, you think about Baltimore's history, Frederick Douglass, Edgar Allan Poe, and media and jazz and music, and we talk about this. So you're at the Sun, go to the WJZ, and you go to the governor's office. After the governor's office, when did you leave there?
So let me see. I left the governor's office. Yeah.
Because were you still consulting with them while you were doing media too, or how did that work? Because I know.
I was full time.
Okay. Okay.
I was full time. So I went to the governor's office in '83, and then let me see. No, I went to Jay-Z in '83. Went to the governor's office in '84, and in '86, Harry Hughes lost the election to Donald Schaefer. And I knew that I couldn't work for Donald Schaefer because he yelled and screamed and treated people bad. And I didn't do that. You know, my father didn't yell and scream at me. So there was definitely no other man that was going to yell and scream at me. It's just that simple.
That's just old school.
And yeah. And so anyway.
You haven't heard a sister say, my father didn't treat me like that. You never heard a sister say, my father.
So a friend of mine who actually was president of what was then the C&P telephone company, and he talked to me and said, I really need your help. We have a dilemma. We've built this national aquarium in Baltimore, and it just has not gone well with the local people. People come from around the world to see it, but locally, it's a dud. And I was wondering if you could help us make a connection. And he said, I don't care how much you're making, we'll pay you. I just want you to go to the aquarium and fix it. I said, well, I don't want to work for William Donald Schaefer, so this is a good job. I'm going to make some money. I'm going to be in a brand new building down on the harbor. So I went to the National Aquarium as Director of Community Affairs and Visitor Services. And I had 115 people working for me. And so I was supervising some areas I had not done before. You know, I was supervising, of course, the community affairs and the media and the public outreach, but I was also supervising security, catered events. I was supervising admissions. And so I found some courses with the National Association of Museums and Parks. And I went and I learned how to manage, an amusement facility. And it was great training. I went to Disney. I went to Disney University. I got my management ears, and learning how to manage an amusement facility. And it was a great opportunity. But again, it gave me the opportunity to bring Black groups, Black students, share their education programs, share that building with the Black community. I started something called Fridays After 5 because a lot of people couldn't afford the aquarium. Fridays After 5, it was $1 to get in. I started Dollar Day. There was, on the anniversary every year, it was $1 to get in. So I started a special program for people with disabilities where we closed the museum to the public and they would come. And so I was able to do those kinds of things to give access to people who would never have had an opportunity to do that before. And then there was so Frank Gunther gave $1 million to remember Henry Hall. Most people don't know it, but the first exhibits at the National Aquarium of Baltimore came from the basement of a Black man named Henry Hall. He gave them his entire collection, and that's what they started with. And so we started
marine biology collection. What did he have?
He was a marine biologist. Yes.
Henry Hall.
Yeah, and so
y'all writing this?
So we started the Henry Hall Foundation, and what we did was students who had an interest in marine biology, we sent them to marine biology programs, Dolphin Lab, and things like that around the country, and we paid everything for those students to go and have those experiences so that they could pursue their dreams of being a marine biologist. And that's when I started fundraising, because the aquarium wouldn't give me any more money, so I started raising money so that I could do this. And it was amazing. We raised enough money that the program continued 10 years after I left.
So I want to take that point, and I'm doing this like a Quentin Tarantino movie, but I want to fast forward to the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. I'm thinking, well, I thought you had retirement. You were 25 years BAL, you had the media background, you retire. Or did you, because I don't remember the smooth transition. I just remember you saying, well, Troy, I'm the director of the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. I thought you were retired.
I actually did retire. And upon hearing that I was going to retire, so let me tell you the Reginald Lewis story. So I knew the family.
Okay.
And I served on the founding board of the museum for 8 years. Okay. So George Russell, who's a prominent attorney in town, was asked by the governor and Pete Rawlings to put together a board and start an African American museum in Baltimore. And so George called me and said, I put together this board and we're going to build the African American Museum and I want you to serve on the board. And I said at the time, I'm really busy. And I really was. At the time, I was, for the first time in my career, first of all, I had been promoted to program director. Right. And I was launching a 24-hour digital channel. So I had 24 hours of programming to find. You know, not prime time, not morning, 24 hours to program an entire channel. So I really didn't have time for this. And so I told George that.
What year was this? Around what year was this?
So let me see. I left the board in 2005. So it must have been like 97.
97, okay. So 97, digital program, 24 hours. Letting y'all know.
So I tell George this, you know, and I think it's over. And so one day I come home and there's a letter with the big gold seal on it from the governor. And it was congratulating on me. The governor had appointed me to the board of the Maryland African American History Museum Corporation. And I'm like, what? I thought,
congratulations.
I gotta go. So I go to the meeting and I get there, and there are, I mean, like every major wealthy white family you could think of was in that room. And I look around and there are a few other black people in there. And I said to myself, this is not the room for me. So afterwards I go talk to George.
Now this is the board for the African American.
Yeah. And so I go talk to George. I'm like, George, he's like, look, Wanda, we got enough money. I don't need you to give money or raise money, but they know nothing about media and they know nothing about connecting with the community. And no matter how much money we put into this, it's not going to happen without those two things. And that's what I need you to do. And so I said, okay. So then I got involved and it was fun because first of all, to have a huge African-American museum in Baltimore, I mean, this is a big deal. And so the first thing that happened was, I mean, like there was nothing. When I say nothing, I mean nothing. It was just an idea.
Right.
And so the first thing we had to do was find a place. And a lot of the city leaders wanted George to take like the old Christopher Columbus Center or the old whatever the other place was. And he said, you know, for all of history, African Americans have had to take hand-me-downs. You all use something, and when it's no longer of use to you or it has failed, you then give it to us. We do not want that. I will not open an African American history museum in a hand-me-down. Either we build a new building or I disband this board. So there was some angst about that. So then we started looking, and he comes up with this land on the corner of Pratt and President in the heart of downtown. And he negotiates and gets the land for $1 a year. And so we get the land. Now, what is it going to be? So we're working with the state on this. And so they hire these architects, white architects. They come back with a square building painted black, literally a square building painted black. We said, no, we want something that speaks to who we are and to the strength of the African American spirit. They came back with the same square building painted bronze. And so George used a few expletives. And then the board voted unanimously to fire the architects. So we fired the architects and subsequently hired Freelon, who actually died this past year. But he also did the National African American Museum in Washington, D.C. But we hired him, and he and his team came in with the building you see, with the red representing the blood that was shed, and the black for the black community, and the yellow for our hope, and the bridge over the troubled water. And we were like, yes. So we were behind schedule by now because we started all over again. And the board, with all of these money people around, raised $38 million. And the interesting part about it is when we went to the General Assembly for funding for the museum, they said, well, we need to see if you can do this. Go raise $1.5 million. Now, this is in the 90s. Go raise $1.5 million and then come back to us. George Russell left Annapolis, drove, he's a partner with Peter Angelos in Angelos's law firm. He drove straight to Angelos's law firm, walked in, told him he needed the $1.5 million. The next day, he met Peter at Harbor Bank. Peter gave him the money. He drove back to Annapolis and says, we got $1.5 million. Now we need to deal with the state. So he did the deal with the state, and the state chipped in the funding, kept the whole operation going, and agreed to fund the museum 100% the first year, 75% the second year, and 50% a year after that. So they raised the money. We built a 30, and the other thing George insisted was that the museum be paid for so that it wouldn't open strata with debt. So he raised $38 million to pay for the building. He raised $2 million to pay for the installation of the exhibits, and $250,000 to construct a African American history curriculum for all state schools from kindergarten through grade 12. And so we started all of that in 2000. We got to that point by 2000, and the museum opened in 2005. And it's 78,000 square feet and 400 years of African American history. And there were interesting things that happened along the way. Like we were sitting there and we had spent the $2 million on the exhibits, and George ran into a family that had the manumission papers of a slave from their family. And he kept the papers in metal, and his fingerprints were in them because he had held them so tight in the sun. And back in those days, if you didn't have your freedom papers, your manumission papers, the police would put you back in slavery. And sometimes they would snatch them from you so they could say you didn't have them and put you back in slavery. So he put his in this metal container. And so we got this whole collection from this former Maryland slave. And the family wanted $1.2 million for it. And so George was at the table and in the boardroom, at the board meeting, and he was just saying, we got to find a way to have this. And John Paparakis said, George, how much is it? He said, 1.2 million. He said, I'll buy it. And so today that sits in that museum for our children, our grandchildren, our grandparents, for everybody to see. And so it was such an amazing experience to be part of that. And so I had been on the board. So I chaired the grand opening. And again, not by choice. George called me and said, I need you to chair the grand opening. I'm like, I'm busy and you don't have any money. And he
At the meeting.
And he said, how much will it cost to do a grand opening? I said, $1 million. And he hung up on me. I figured that was done. The next day, George calls back. He says, I got $750,000. Chair the damn grand opening. And so I did. And it was amazing. So, Pratt Street is a major thoroughfare. And so I decided I wanted to close Pratt Street so that we could have this big grand opening. And I did. And I wanted national media coverage. And so I got the networks, but I wanted CNN there. And so a friend of mine was vice president of news for CNN. His name's Prince L. And so I call him, so Prince L, I'm on this board and I'm chairing the grand opening of this museum. And I tell him my whole great story. And he said, and he's Black, so I expected he would get it. And he said, Wanda, that's a local story. CNN is a national news network. Okay. So then.
Now at this time, had you named it?
So it's 2005.
Right. Had you named it?
We had named it because Reginald Lewis's widow gave us $5 million.
Okay.
So that was the name.
But they still said it's not a national story.
Right. And so Barbara Mikulski calls and she's all excited about it. So I call back. I'm like, Barbara Mikulski's come in. He says, Wanda, that's a local story. We're a national news network. So every time something happened, we got this big deal producer and band director from Broadway. Right. He's coming and he's bringing a band. Wanda, your little museum is a local story. Take it to BAL. And so finally I called back the fourth time. I'm like, Prince L, this is a big deal. We are the largest African-American museum in the country. He said to me, Wanda, if I cover your little local museum opening, will you not call me again? Said, yes.
That dripping water.
That morning I got to the museum and the CNN trucks and the NBC trucks, everything was lined up. And we had closed the streets and we released doves and we had a Broadway band and we opened the museum. And the interesting thing about it is Lonnie Bunch, who started the National Museum, for 5 years, he came to our board meetings to see how to build an African-American museum. And he did the same thing we did. He raised the money. He raised $500 million to build the museum. He looked at how we collected our artifacts. In DC, yep. Right. He did the same thing. He hired our architect and some of our staff. But
come on over with me.
But it was just a great experience. So that was my connection. So I chaired the grand opening. I had chaired the groundbreaking, so I chaired the grand opening, and I chaired the first anniversary of the museum in 2006. And then I decided I'd really been around long enough. It was time to go. And so I left. I left the board, and I figured they'd get newer, younger people, new ideas, and it would be great. And so 2008 happened and the economy took a hit and nonprofits take the hit. Nonprofits in the Black community, when the major community and the white community gets a cough, we get pneumonia. And so that's what happened. And so the museum was suffering. So they hired a new executive director and things were still struggling along. And so I called him and said, I set that museum up to run for 2005. It needs to be redone. You need to reorganize it, blah, 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 blah. And I wrote him a strategic plan to do that. But he didn't do it. And that was okay with me. It was his thing. It was just my suggestion. So finally, long story short, they hired a PhD and he's a very smart person, couldn't do it. So finally, I get a call to come to the museum because it's on its last legs. It's probably at the end of the year going to close. And so anyway, they said, we want you to meet with the board. And I said, okay. So I went there to meet with the board, and I had the strategic plan that I wrote for the museum in 1998. And so they had gone on a retreat, and they had a strategic plan, and I read their strategic plan before I went. And I went in and I said, I read your strategic plan. If I was executive director of this museum, I wouldn't do any of this. And the room was silent. I said, here's the plan I wrote in 1997. We haven't done that yet. So you can't get there first. You can't get there first. You cannot do that. And then I proceeded, I'm a producer, so I had a video. I showed them a video. I said, if I'm executive director of this museum, this is what we're going to do. And they were like, whoa. And so I thought this was just a meeting. And so I left. And so then I got a call that the board voted unanimously to make me executive director of the Lewis Museum.
And what year was this?
So that's how I got there, 2016.
2016. So what's funny, and I want to let you know about media spin is a real thing. You can spend it for your benefit or you spend it for your disadvantage. So when in 2018 or 2019, when Wanda left, they said, oh, Wanda, after just 2 years, why would she move on? And you just heard she's been involved with it from the from the commencement, from the first idea. So, all right, now we're gonna rewind a bit and jump into.
Let me just tell you. Let's just finish that story.
So
go. I went there to fix it. So when I went there, I was hired in August and started in September. The money was going to run out in December. There was $300,000 worth of unpaid bills. There was $400,000 owed to the state for payroll. And there was $900,000 on the line of credit.
Yeah, plus you said at that point in time, they hadn't done anything, because I remember when I remember the Pomp and Circumstance when it first opened. But I also remember not really hearing or any polls that really influenced ticket sales, the way they're supposed to make money. So
right.
How were they making money?
So none of that was happening. And so I went there, and the month before I started, I spent that month meeting with all the people I needed to meet with to find out what was going on there. I met with every member of the staff, and I asked them for their resume, their last evaluation, and what they thought their job was and what they expected to do. And I met with the accountants, I met with the state, I met with the Speaker of the House, because there's $2 million in the state budget for the museum, and that was going away in December. So I needed them to give me that money. And I wrote a plan of 7 things that I was going to do to fix the museum. But I needed them to give me the first $1 million to do it.
Right.
And they agreed to do that. And then I proceeded to deal with the 7 things I needed to deal with. There was amazingly, a lot of the revenue could come from building rentals and group sales. The person doing that job was not generating enough revenue to cover their salary, not to mention benefits. There was no development director. The chief financial officer left when they heard I was coming because they knew better.
He was like, I'll see y'all later. He's like, where you going? I'm going to lunch. 8:20 in the morning, Ted.
And so I just I've been laid out my plan. This is my plan. This is what we're going to do. And everybody's like, we've never done this before. This is the plan. If you want to do it, we'll do it. But if we don't want to do it, this is a bus now. And some of you all are in the wrong seats, and some of you all are on the wrong bus. And so I gave everybody 90 days to get in the right seat and determine whether or not they needed to be on the bus. And then after that, I needed to hire people who could do what needed to be done. I mean, I had one employee tell me, I looked at the calendar, I'm like, why are you off every Monday? well, it's just in case I work Saturday or Sunday. I said, no, it doesn't work like that. If you work Saturday or Sunday, we talk about when you're going to take that day off. Kept doing it. Adios. We had horrible printed materials that made no sense, that did nothing for us. And so I said to the PR person, now the one place to challenge me is not the PR and the media. That's just not the place to challenge me. And I said, these aren't effective. Let's create some new things. This is what I have in mind. And she reprinted the same thing that we had been doing. And then she came in my office and said, wanted me to sign the invoice. I said, no, because I told you not to do that. She said, they're on the loading dock. I said, and so are you.
You know, here's the funny thing.
I could do a better job of the PR than that.
I guess it's a good thing and a bad thing, because some of these people didn't even know who you were as far as with the museum. They didn't know you were there at the beginning and having that passion in it. So
anyways, fast forward, what happened was, like they spent $500,000 on an exhibit that didn't make $100,000. So there was a $400,000 loss there. So the first thing I did was I canceled all the exhibits that had been booked over the next 5 years. I canceled every one of them.
Yeah.
Why? Because there's no money to pay for them. I said, when we get the money, we'll bring the exhibit. And so instead, I hired an education director who said, we should do Maryland Collects for Jacob Lawrence. And she said, people who have Jacob Lawrence. We should borrow them, do a Jacob Lawrence exhibit, and everybody will come see it. That's what we did. We borrowed, Eddie and Sylvia Brown had 12. They loaned them to me. In the end, we had 55 pieces of amazing Jacob Lawrence artwork.
And that's Mika, the ones who did the arts building on in the art district, right?
Yes.
Institute of Art.
Yeah. So we had 55 pieces. People came from California, Jamaica, Honduras. People came from all over because they hadn't seen a collection that broad and that large of Jacob Lawrence anywhere. The advantage is we raised a lot of money and we didn't spend it on the exhibit. The exhibit cost us nothing other than to install it.
Right.
And so, we were able to partner with the school system and bring more school kids in. We were able to write grants and get some foundation money and build some corporate support. And I had this friend, Drew Hawkins, who was with Morgan Stanley, and I hadn't talked to him a while, but I called him like, Drew, I'm at the museum and I need some help. And he came on board. The year before I got there, the gala raised about $30,000. Drew came on board and he raised $150,000. And together we raised over $300,000 for the gala. And so my goal was to fix the team so that we'd have a competent staff, to fix the operation, and to pay off all the debt. And so that's what I did. And so I signed a 2-year contract. It took me 2.5 years. But in 2.5 years, we increased the attendance, we wiped out the debt, we fixed the staff. And so I felt they were ready to run, We fed the baby milk, the baby grew up. And I mean, when I got there, they had closed the gift shop. I opened the gift shop and we started making $30,000 a month in the gift shop.
I love it. All right. Because I know we can do a part 2 and part 3, but I want to, before we get out of here, and this is not, I'm not going to rush this portion because I want to hear when you brought me in and when did you transition into, first off, when did you transition into programming at BAL? What did you go in and immediately get into programming, or when did you get to BAL?
Well, I went in the programming department,
Okay.
but doing the public affairs and the public affairs programming.
Right.
So that's what I went in doing. So I went there in 1991. And in 1993, I was promoted to executive in charge of production. And in 1996, I was promoted to director of programming and public affairs. So both departments. So that's how long I've been in programming.
Right. So when I met you, well, when we connected and I was getting some information from you, you were the one that really taught me what syndication was. And the model you told me about was the young man who I had recognized a lot of what he was doing, but on the fringes and saw the comedy stuff. You told me about how Byron Allen did it and how you would purchase content from Byron. And that became kind of my whole flow as what I wanted to do. I always, since I started my company, I said, okay, one day I'm gonna be a media mogul. I don't know how it's gonna happen. I don't know what's going on. But around that time I started my company, you might remember when they did the small business, I think Finney and sister, I forgot the sister's name, minority business, whatever, at the Renaissance. Well, that year is the same year I said, okay, I'm gonna go full-fledged with Ghost Host Entertainment, marketing, promotion, entertainment. And I met Willie Gary, Russell Simmons, and Bob Johnson the same year. Two of those men, black men, were billionaires, and neither one of them was Russell Simmons. he had just sold Def Jam for, I think, $240 million, was still on the board. And a lot of people was like, how you sold Def Jam for that amount? And when I got a chance to see Russell speak, he said something key. I'm on the front row, and he said, at the beginning of the thing, know your number. And Russell knew his number. Right. And he knew what he pushed Def Jam as. He hadn't valued Def Jam at anything spectacular, but he had a certain value for Fat Farm. Was trying to, but that 240 came up, and they gave it. It's like recently with Oprah, with selling. I think she sold 70% of OWN back or to Discovery for $70 million. When I first heard it, I was like, and then some said, Troy, well, if she got $70 million cash, and she's still on the board, she still has 30% ownership, so she gets stock. And she's still the chairman. Right. You know, so I looked at those things and then and you told me what Byron was doing and how you would buy content and how long ago he started buying certain things and stuff like that methodology. What do you think is the state of, how do you look at the state of media, television, and I guess production now in 2020, this new, because we're definitely in an overwhelmed, we were already in a new era, but with everything that's going on now, it's like it's a new era. You know,
it is definitely a new era. I think it's difficult in that we still don't have a lot of ownership. And even when we have ownership like Byron, he has trouble getting placement. I guess you saw recently he filed a suit because the major cable channels weren't putting him on. And so, right. Even when we have ownership and just when I think about Bill Cosby, nobody paid Bill Cosby any attention until all of a sudden he had $300 million to buy CBS. And when they discovered he had that kind of money, all of a sudden there were all these issues with Bill Cosby. But that's a different story. But it's a
necessary one. It's a necessary one.
He wanted there to be a Black-owned major network. And he had the money to do that. And it was amazing the number of people that stepped up to buy the network to keep him from buying the network. And so we still do not have control in a major way. We have some, but we still don't have control in a major way. But what the digital environment has done is something that was not expected by the majority community. And that is, it has given us some access. And so while it's not widespread on the level of ABC, NBC, or CBS, we can reach enough people with our message to make a difference. And we see that now in what happened with the Floyd incident.
Mm.
A cell phone started that. A cell phone. And social media started circulating it. That's where it didn't get on TV first. It got on social media first.
Right.
And so social media is now, even though we don't control these networks, social media is still starting to drive the narrative. And so for me, it makes me very optimistic because we do have more access than we used to have. Because without that, where would we be? How would we get our message out?
It's like Gil Scott-Heron said, the revolution wouldn't be televised. It literally happened. It's prophetic because you're dead on, and something that, and as harsh as it is to say, something that a racist generation of people used to glory in. Look
Right.
what we did. All of the sudden was the same. That same sword it's becoming the same sword to a demise of a way of thinking and a history that is continuously bombarded, crushed, and oppressed people.
Right. And
So
the conversation continuously has to be equal access.
equal access.
Because we have education, we have experience, but when you're competing with the person whose father plays golf with the CEO, we still don't have equal access.
Mm.
We don't get the equal opportunity. We don't get the same chance. And that's still something to fight for.
So, as you mentioned, ownership is definitely something that it's not even something you want to see. It's something we need. How did you feel, and not throw anything on about, how did you feel about it when Bob Johnson did sell BET?
I felt he did what was right for Bob Johnson.
Right.
And I think that.
And did you realize, or I should say it like this, being in national news and seeing the expansion of media and everything that was going on, how big of an impact do you think BT had and would have had going forward had something been different in how it was done?
I think, well, the reason that Bob Johnson had to sell BET was because he couldn't get the advertising. Because Madison Avenue, which controls the advertising, had basically decided that you really do not have to give advertising dollars to them because they are consumers by nature and they're going to buy their products anyway. And so you can advertise in the New York Times and on ABC and NBC and CBS, and you're still going to get them. You do not have to advertise on BET. So the minute that Paramount took it over, the advertising tripled. And so the people selling the ads and working at BET instantly made more money. Bob Johnson got money, and they made more money. I mean, there were young Black men making $200,000 and $300,000 a year
in advertising.
And the reason is because once Paramount bought it, everybody started advertising on it. All the major, you look at BET now and see who's advertising on there. You never saw those people advertising on there before. And they weren't going to advertise on there. And Bob wasn't going to be able to take that further.
All comes down to the dollars.
Somebody taught me the golden rule. He who has the gold rules. And that is true.
Yes, indeed. So What's next? What's next for Wanda? Because I've learned not to say you actually retired. So what's next? I know you're doing things now. I don't even want to say next. What would you like to do next?
I do not have a job, and I do not want a job. I love getting up when I want and going where I want when I want as soon as the pandemic is over. But I did get to go to the South Pacific. But I'll tell you what I would love to see. I would love to see unity in the Black community. I would love to see us be able to come together, coalesce around a cause, agree on leadership, and do that, as opposed to just spastically making our stand and spastically fighting these battles. If we could in each city come together and have leadership and do it, come together and make demands and do what needs to be done and take a stand and control our consumption. So that if somebody doesn't support us, we don't support them. I mean, right now in Baltimore, there's a crab house, and there are 5 of them. And he wrote a remark. This is only one thing he said, but on Facebook he said, watch them burn down stuff, but I bet they won't burn down the social services office.
I remember. I saw that.
And so what happened was people who bought crabs from him decided, we're not going to do that anymore. And then he says, 75% of my clientele is African American. And I didn't mean to offend them. No, you meant what you said. You didn't mean to lose
your bottom line
of your business. And so what we say, fine. But what we do speaks much louder. When you don't spend your money there, when we look at how we spend our money, when we decide that our businesses are great enough to support those, and our professionals, our lawyers, our doctors, our professionals, if we support them, they can build a strong enough base and hire the staff and provide the same services, but we don't. But if we did that, if we harnessed our economic power, that's a movement I would lead. To unify and harness our economic power.
I love it. I'll say this and now I don't want to let you go. But it was very Dave Chappelle did a piece recently, 846.
Yes.
And he mentioned that he talked to somebody, and I was talking to different people, people in their 60s, people that I can never tell how old Wanda is. She just told me today. I'm not telling you. But something about African American sisters who get over 50, y'all, they crushing it. Y'all younger sisters got to catch up. But he mentioned he talked to a friend of his who's from South Africa, and he said, well, what happened during apartheid, this, that, another. And this is the same thing I said. And some of us are skeptical, some of us, but I've noticed the power of it. I'm in the Long Beach area now, Bixby Knolls, beautiful area, nice houses, affluent. From what I see, mostly Caucasian. But to go down the street and see in chalk during this time where white kids are writing Black Lives Matter. And I'm going down the street with my daughter and she's riding her bike and I'm 45 years old and I'm sitting there trying to hold back tears so my daughter doesn't like, what's wrong with that? And she's seeing rocks painted in windows saying Black Lives Matter. I don't care if it's the fad or not. Christmas was a fad at one point. I don't care.
Exactly.
What? Because what we learned from media is that repetition and frequency will become the reality. And it happens all the time. So I see it. But when he said that, young man said, yeah, we're fighting apartheid, we're doing our thing. Mandela was set to die in prison. But what happened is when the world took hold of it, it gained critical mass.
Exactly.
Once critical mass shifted, something that I'm talking to my friends and people that I know that own Black businesses now. I'm saying, look, the divesting from South Africa, the dollars that started being taken away from South Africa, and also the critical mass together changed that. Now, yeah, it takes years of, getting rid of systemic racism. We get that. But right now,
right.
I think there's never been a time I can remember where the world has said we matter. What does that feel like to you?
It is an amazing feeling. I can't switch channels long enough to see London, Paris, Bristol, England. Come on. It feels great. It feels like a moment in time. In the same way, I never thought I would live to see a worldwide pandemic. I went through corporate training on how to respond to a pandemic. So, but it was just corporate training. It was not anything I ever expected to experience. We never expected in a short period of time a worldwide pandemic, economic almost collapse.
Yes.
and a whole civil rights movement. This civil rights movement, the 60s paled in comparison to what's happening right now. What's happening right now. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's thinking about it. Some people scared to talk about it out loud, but they thinking about it. And there will be some systemic changes, but the more we press, the more we get.
The more we press.
You've got to keep it simple, say it often, and make it burn.
Say it again. Keep it simple, say it often.
Make it burn.
Make it burn. Wanda, the Queen Draper. There's no way to say it. I thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Oh, this is only part one, so we're gonna do this some more. We're gonna do this and until we're doing it, and we're in my studio, overlooking whatever city decided, and I'm interviewing you on my network. I appreciate you so much. I love you with all my heart. Thank you for all you've done for us. Like continuously are doing for us. And if you guys got all the information, follow Wanda Draper. She is, don't overwhelm her with too many mentor calls because she got to have time for me. But thank you for all you've done. And in the face of whatever, and just stand up and say, no, that's not right. We're going to do it this way, and showing that strength and outside of, like, I don't know if you maybe you've had an interview like this before. I don't know. You probably never had an interview like this before. But I'm so glad that you took the time and gave us a little bit. We squeezed 40 years of history into about 90 minutes. So for those people that are getting a chance to watch this, do your due diligence, do your research, and let's keep pressing forward. So we have much more to do, but we're in a great time in history right now.
Yes, we are. There's work to be done, but we've made some accomplishments.
Yes. And thanks to you. So thank you so much. I love you.
Thank you. Love you too.
I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.